Hello and welcome back, guys. We're here for the last round of this league, the first league that I've ever done on the channel with Esper Draw-Go, and I would say we've learned a lot so far, so hopefully we can manage to win this last match here and get our value back, at least half of it, and if not, perhaps we do some more learning. Hopefully I won't play as poorly as I did in the round against Death and Taxes. That was pretty embarrassing, but you know what? That's a part of being on YouTube, is putting yourself out there, and maybe you can gain something from my mistakes, even if they're just dumb mistakes like walking right into countering our opponent's Stoneforge with a Leon and Arbiter in play. So I don't know if there's anything to be learned from that other than just to be very careful and think through your plays. And if I can't do it, well, by golly, I hope that you will learn from my mistakes not to do it. So regardless, hopefully some tighter play. I will see you guys in the match. Alright, we have our match. So jump in here and get this league finished. I am excited to make some changes after the match. We'll be on the play, obviously. I already see a remand in our hand, which I like, but we're missing our second and third land drops, which, for Esper Draw-Go, that usually spells death, sadly. I think we don't have any choice but to mulligan this. Even if we hit our second land drop, we would have to then hit our third land drop and fourth land drop remaining. It's just not where we want to be. This one we can keep, however. And there's a toss-up between whether we bottom the Jace or the Teferi here. Obviously, we need to keep our early interactive spells. Maybe we could bottom Spell Snare, actually, since we can rely on Logic not to do some work, but I think I'm fine bottoming a Planeswalker here, and I think the weaker of the two is probably Jace. We'll see. Teferi might give us the ability to dig ourselves out of an awkward situation, depending on what our opponent is playing, and it lets us hold up interaction, especially if our opponent is playing an aggressive deck, so we'll go ahead and play out our Flooded Strand here. Tapped Steam Vent's Pass, huh? That's pretty curious. We could be playing against a potential Blue Moon deck. I think for now I'm okay fetching one Hallowed Fountain, but we'll probably hold up our remaining fetches until we absolutely have to use them. And let's play out the Flooded Strand here, because if our opponent has a surprise Blood Moon on turn 2, which is really unlikely, we'd like to fetch for basic planes, as we can always top deck one of our 4 basic islands more easily, so we'll just untap here. Esper Charm is a good one. Don't know if we want to play that at our opponent's instep this upcoming turn. We might. But then we'd have to decide for sure what we're doing with our basics, though, so I don't really hate just playing out Field of Ruin and fetching for a basic and activating Field of Ruin on our opponent's instep. That's one way to use our mana. It's looking like that might be the best play, so rather than hold up Esper Charm here, because our opponent could just interact with it, and it forces in our fetch choices here. No reason to play anything into our opponent's remands, potentially, either. I mean, eventually we will want to, so that we can get this Teferi in play, but that's a little further down the line, so doesn't have to be right now. And Field of Ruin is the hardest one of our land cards currently to turn into a basic land if we need to play around Blood Moon, so... And it's looking like we probably do need to play around Blood Moon, so that's what I'm going to do. This is going to be a Plains, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I'm not super fond of it, but what else are we going to do? And then we are going to fire this field at our opponent's Steam Vents. Now our Polluted Delta can either search for another island or for a swamp, depending on what we're feeling in the moment. Nimble Obstructionist would be rude here if our opponent had that. Most people don't play that card, though, so it's probably not that card. If our opponent wants to... I mean, I was going to say if they want to cast a Snapcaster Mage. They don't have any targets currently, but Archmage's Charm to draw 2. That's fine. Okay, well now we really wish we had that Jace in our hand, because we could easily have punished this play from our opponent. But we don't have that ability, so let's just play our land and pass it back. And I think we should fetch and shock and play out this Esper Charm. Our opponent might Cryptic Command to counter and draw, in which case we can untap and slam Teferi, and if our opponent doesn't have Force, then we're in a really good shape. That is assuming we hit an untapped land. If they don't interact, then we get to try to find our 5th land drop here, so... And if our opponent does have Blood Moon ultimately, then we can just use our Teferi to tuck it, so... And we'll draw here. We don't know what our opponent's holding or even what our opponent is doing at this point. We just need to find more cards. All right. No land, huh? All right, well, we're passing it back, I suppose. It's not unreasonable to think about pathing our own Snapcaster Mage at some point. That's something to keep in mind. Izzet Charm to draw 2 and discard 2. Well, this is an interesting one because our opponent is losing a card in this process since they're spending the Izzet Charm to stay even on cards, drawing 2 and discarding 2. So we actually actively want our opponent to cast this, but I don't know if there's something our opponent would be trying to discard here. I'm inclined to let this go. I think our opponent will have things like Snapcaster Mage, or if they're playing something like Thing in the Ice, we might be able to hit that with a Spell Snare instead. So let's wait for a juicier target. They discard Cryptic and Remand. Bold statement, opponent. Very bold statement. Alright, are we still doing the Esper Charm thing? Here we don't really want to run into a Cryptic command. Counter like bounce a land would be pretty devastating, but I think we just have enough not going on that we need to cast this. So let's draw again here. Again, we could target our opponent. That's perfect. We wanted to hit land drops. All right, let's play out our Delta as we can get our last remaining basic if we have to. Well, not last remaining basic, but you know what I mean. The last color of basic. Not just jamming into our opponent's counter magic here. We could be seeing through the breach here. So our opponent could be doing this to trick us out. If they don't have an Emrakul in hand, then this Through the Breach does nothing, and they could just be playing to untap and cast another Through the Breach. I don't know if I want to play around that, though. We can always Cryptic tap on our opponent's upkeep if they do have the Emrakul, but then we lose to a counterspell that is not a 2-mana counterspell that we can Spell Snare, which is pretty awkward. Our opponent didn't discard an Emrakul to the Izzet Charm either, so this makes me think that they most likely have it, but I don't know, this is a rough situation, because really I would rather not tap out here. I guess it's pretty free to fire a Logic Knot. This represents some additional counter magic from our side. Counter unless they pay 1. I don't think they would be playing Spirit Guide, so I'm not going to play around it. This should be fine. And if they decide to go for it this upcoming turn, then, you know, good on them, but I mean, we just have to do this. They also might not have a second Through the Breach. Okay, and they pass it back. Fantastic news. Do we want to fetch? I guess not. There's no real point. Force Negation is fantastic. Alright, so we're in good position. We'll just pass it back here. Keep doing what we're doing. Another Through the Breach, you say? Well, now we can Cryptic. Well, we would be able to Cryptic plus Logic Knot, but we don't have a second counterspell in hand. We could snap Logic Knot and continue representing something, but I think it's very unlikely that our opponent has an additional Through the Breach here. If they have a third Through the Breach, then that does suck for us, but I'm not playing around it. I think we do have to Cryptic this one. Well, actually, we could let it resolve and then fight really hard next turn over a Cryptic tap draw, since then we would have access to Force Negation plus Spell Snare. That might be better than just hard countering with the Cryptic here. And then they shuffle their Through the Reaches back in, though, so nah. I mean, we're playing into our opponent's Force Negation if we Cryptic right now, though, which is really unfortunate. If they have a Force Negation, they would have to hardcast it during their turn, so then we could, like, force their Force and Spell Snare their 2-mana interaction, if that's their plan. I'm gonna let this resolve, actually. And we'll cast a Cryptic to tap and draw on our opponent's upkeep here. I guess we should maybe do it beginning of combat. I don't know. I think it's unlikely they have a third Through the Breach and a second Emrakul, so let's just cast the Cryptic now before they draw a better form of interaction. Tap all creatures your opponents control, draw a card. This gives us access to our Force Negation, which we didn't have last turn, so Remand. No thank you. And now if they have any other interactive spell, we just force it. Probably untapping to slam the, there we go. There's the Force Negation that we were playing around. Okay, so let's, hit the Force, I guess, here. I mean, we much rather exile the remand, to be honest. What is this force targeting? Targeting the spell snare? Nah, we just have to hit the force here, right? If we exile the remand, they force our spell snare and exile it, but then our cryptic still resolves. If they had force targeting our cryptic here, that would have been a much better play, actually. So let's go after the remand. Yeah. And we'll pitch the Snapcaster Mage because Teferi is going to be our route to winning this game, I think. There we go. Tap draw. We'll yield to this instep. All right, and that was game 1. Pretty straightforward there. I'm really glad that I figured that line out about playing around Force of Negation. Here, obviously, we want Dispels. We probably want Relics for our opponent's Snapcaster Mages, and potential Mystic Sanctuaries. Aether Gust hits Blood Moon, and it hits Through the Breach, and potential alt win conditions like Keranos or Ral Zarek. I think that Gusts are probably warranted here. And the 2-mana slot. I don't know why I keep putting the 1-mana spells on the 2-mana slot. Maybe Aether Gust hits the Breach, whereas Celestial Purge doesn't. So I think Gust is better than Purge here. And if we're bringing Gust, we probably don't want to bring in Purge at all. Obviously, we want Mystical Disputes, so we'll bring those in. And here we can trim some paths, as they don't do much. In fact, we might be able to trim all of them. I don't hate that. We can answer our opponent's Snapcaster Mages by blocking with our own, or with Eliminate, or just spell snaring them, or something along those lines. We probably don't want Supreme Verdict either, unless our opponent is boarding into Young Pyromancer, but not much that we can do about that anyway, so let's just forget that for the moment. I'm not going to play into it until they actually have it, so. And then, what else? I'm not in love with Relic here, but I think it's enough of a headache for our opponent that we probably do want it. Archmage's Charm and Esper Charm are fantastic. Maybe Cryptic is a little bad against our opponent's disputes and, potential interaction along those lines, so we could probably trim a Cryptic, maybe not both. We do potentially need to tap draw or bounce Planeswalker or something, or Blood Moon with a Cryptic. I guess we're not really going to be bouncing Blood Moon with Cryptic anyways. Let's just trim 2, just to be safe. What else? Force seems great. All of these cards seem great. I don't know what else I would want to cut here. I guess we don't want all of the relics, and we might be able to trim a land. I don't know, though. Man, all these cards are good. What would you do? I guess Eliminate is the most dead card. We have very little interaction for our opponent's Snapcaster Mages, which could be a problem. I really don't love that, but otherwise, Path to Exile is pretty dead, so let's just submit this way, and if we get punished for having almost no removal in our main deck, then, well, and I guess it's our main deck now, but if we get punished for having almost no removal, then maybe we bring in Paths again. We're definitely keeping this hand. It has everything we want. We even have a way to keep up with our opponent's Snapcaster Mage, if we need to. Alright, let's play out a fetch here. Nah, our opponent's not going to Blood Moon us on turn 2. So we can just play a tapped Watery Grave. I don't think there's anything our opponent would do on turn 2 that we... I guess, perhaps if they had a Thing in the Ice, this is the only thing that punches us. I think, that in mind, we probably should have played around Thing in the Ice anyways and shocked in. Hopefully our opponent just doesn't have it. Okay, they don't. So we're fine. Okay, so now we'll play out a fetch land, as I could definitely see a situation where we need to fetch for a basic here. Omen of the Sea. Fine. It's a good card. Don't get me wrong, but we can't fight over our opponent's card selection here. Maybe once we have extra mana and our Mystical Dispute is going dead and something like that, then maybe then we could potentially start interacting with our opponents, like Omen of the Seas and stuff, but only until that point. Let's get our other fetch land out of here. Protect ourselves as much as possible against a potential Blood Moon. Brazen Borrower, you say? I guess we want to dispute this. Yeah. There it goes. We have very little removal, so we need to counter our opponent's threats to gain as much time as possible. I mean, Shark Typhoon does block it, but ideally we'll be clocking them with our Shark Typhoon. So, another fetch land. I like it. Lands are good here. I mean, our hand is literally just all counter magic and a Shark Typhoon. We might be very soon taking the chance to just hard cast a Force Negation, as free casting it is not really free. It depends on the situation, though. Ooh, Desolate Lighthouse is a nice one. Colonnade. Let's play out an untap land here so we have access to a Dispel in addition to our 2 counterspells here. This makes it less likely we have to pitch to force. Activating Lighthouse. Oh, just going straight for the Through the Breach, huh? Okay, I think we Dispel this. We could remand it. That is not the worst. Then our opponent could, like, cast it again and we have Logic Knot plus Dispel plus Force Negation backup. I think maybe remanding is fine here. It's not really going to get a better target, so let's do that. And we only have 1 planes on our deck anyways, so we might as well just go ahead and use this opportunity to fetch out a second island. Here it goes. Alright. There we go. And our Field of Ruin is very nice to answer our opponent's Desolate Lighthouse. Not yet to the point of cycling Shark Typhoon, I think. Yeah, we'll definitely play out this field. If our opponent does nothing with their mana in this upcoming turn, we might just go ahead and toss the field. Through the Breach does nothing during our opponent's instep, because then they go to their next turn and have to sacrifice the Emrakul they put into play anyways, so here comes the same Through the Breach that we are already familiar with. So we can hard cast Force here and still hold up Logic Knot plus Dispel. And I think that's our best move. So, yeah, let's do that. Oh, no, we need to tap the field to have both Logic Knot and Dispel. What am I doing? Should we hit the Lighthouse now? I guess not. Yeah, that might have been a huge mistake. That might have been a game-losing kind of mistake. Alright, well, what are we playing around here? Let's get an island off this delta, since our next delta can get a swamp. And I think we're just casting the Dispel. I think Logic Knot has more potential targets. If our opponent has a Mystical Dispute here, then we lost specifically because I didn't tap this Field of Ruin. I was tunnel visioned on activating Field of Ruin at our opponent's instep, and I didn't think about the cost as far as our blue pips is concerned, so this Dispel actually happens to play around Spell Pierce as well, which is quite nice. They have the Dispute. Great. Okay, well, let's see if they have the Emrakul. If they have the Emrakul, we probably just lose. They have the Emrakul. Man, that's so annoying. Okay. Let's see, we have to sacrifice 6 permanents, which is all of our lands. Yeah, this game's over. Yep. What an unfortunate way to lose game 2 here. I think we were otherwise looking very good. Okay, so we know our opponent has Brazen Borrower in addition to their Snapcaster Mages, so that makes me want to bring in some of our removal spells, specifically Eliminate. Actually, Eliminate doesn't hit any relevant Planeswalkers, I don't think. So let's have Path instead. I guess they could have something like the Royal Scions, but I highly doubt that. It wouldn't be the worst, since they could pitch an Emrakul and shuffle it back in, but... Alright, and what do we not want here? The relics probably are still fine. We saw our opponent with Mystical Dispute over there, so we may want to trim even further on our cryptics and just have 0. I don't hate that. Not 0. I guess we can afford to keep 1. I think 1 cryptic is a good hedge against some kind of resolved permanent. Yeah, we'll run it back. Hopefully we can manage not to do that. What we did last game. Oof. This hand is very tempting to me, actually. We can cycle Shark Typhoon for 0 to try to hit a 3rd land drop if we don't find one in time, but I don't know, though. Having to pitch 2 cards to free cast Force twice might not be the most useful thing. I think we gotta try it, though. Worst comes to worst, we can always force pitching another Force, so... They put 1 on bottom, 1 on top, and we immediately find our second land drop, which is fantastic news. We'll play it out there. Definitely not fetching. We'd like to draw more lands if we possibly can. And we have one of our paths, so if our opponent has something like a Vanillion Click or a Brazen Borrower, then we're totally fine. Are we cycling Typhoon for 1? I think we have no choice. And do we play around Blood Moon? That is a tough question. I think that we do not. I think that we don't. At least not for now. I'm not even sure that we can afford to. Alright, and here goes our cycling of Shark Typhoon. 4th land drop off the top, please. That would be nice. Esper Charm. Alright, there's our 4th land drop. It doesn't enter untapped, but we'll deal. And the Shark is a very good blocker against Snapcaster Mage, Vanillion Click, Brazen Borrower, unless they just bounce the Shark first, but... Brazen Borrower just hard casted, huh? Okay. I'm game for that. Not even wasting the time to bounce the Shark. Very interesting to me. We could be aggressively forcing our opponent's, like, Seer Visions to try to stop them from hitting land drops. I don't know if that's the way to go. It also stops them, potentially, from setting up the pieces of their combo that they want set up. Let's just let this damage go through. We're not worried about 3 damage at the moment. And this is a good time to go ahead and cash in our Field of Ruin, I think. We have another 2 in the deck to draw if our opponent finds their Desolate Lighthouse. And, yeah. This will get us an island, I think. Actually... rough choice. We want the plains in case our opponent... No, actually, we have the Aether Gust instead of Purge. So, we probably just want to get an island here. We'll go with the island. Not going to path the Borrower on their Insup right now, as that would just immediately give them mana to Through the Reach plus backup. Another land is fantastic. We're probably trading our Shark here, so let's just let this go. Cracking Omen of the Sea, I respect it. A Braid or Shark? We could let this go and just path our opponent's Borrower. We could path our own Shark. We could force this. Hard casting of Force is not the worst here, and if our opponent has, like, some interaction, we could remand our own Force, even. I think we let this go. I'm not sure, though. Our opponent only has 3 mana up, so there's not a whole lot they could do if we wanted to interact with this. This might be a good chance to get one of the forces out of our hand, as 3 mana is a lot. I don't think we are giving up much by doing this either. I guess the one thing that we should consider is playing a Force Negation right now plays into a Mystical Dispute, whereas we otherwise might not be playing into that. We could just play a Logic Knot. But nah, I'm just going to let this go. And here I think we're good to just, even in combat here, just throw out this path. Get this Borrower out of here. Not let it clock us at all. We don't want to lose to Bolt, Snap, Bolt. And yeah, we just untap here. Another land is fantastic. And this might actually be a situation where we want to Charm to make our opponent discard Mystic Sanctuary. Getting back Serum Visions, I guess? Yep. That's fine with me. Ashiok. I don't know that we even care about this, in all honesty. We would want to fetch first, obviously, so let's do that. I'm probably just getting a Plains, again, to play around a Blood Moon here. I think we just let this go. Ashiok doesn't really bother me. It does weaken our Logic Knot anyways, though, so maybe we want to cash in our Logic Knot just to get our value from it, and then if they counter back, then, like, whatever. We'll have Hardcast Force plus Remand plus Force Negation from hand as backup for later on, so 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's probably fine. Actually, we can leave our Path in the Yard and tap a Plains here, as that still plays around Mystical Dispute, and it potentially leaves us something to snap back. If our opponent wants to throw a Cryptic here just to mess around, I could see us forcing it. Remand targeting the Logic Knot. That's a weird one. I guess this is fine. If they're using the interaction on our Logic Knot, then we don't really care. Sure. We have Exiled, Esper Charm, Remand, Mystical Dispute, Aethergust. A lot of good cards here. Alright, let's go for our Esper Charm here. Start this ball rolling. And do we make our opponent discard? Nah, let's just draw. We want to hit more land drops before we start making our opponent discard, because then we can start clocking with Tar Pit. Mystical Dispute, fantastic. Esper Charm, also fantastic. Fetch land doesn't do anything against this Ashiok, unfortunately. Not currently. If we activate Tar Pit, then we'd have only 3 mana up. We could Remand plus Mystical Dispute plus Force Negation, Exiling Force. Is it too early to start clocking with Tar Pit? I don't know. We could lose the Tar Pit to a Bolt, and that would be just the worst. Although it might give us a chance to cash in our Logic Knot here. I say we just pass. We have another Esper Charm to busy ourselves with mana. We might be getting close to Esper Charm making our opponent discard type territory here. And this also is an unintended upside of having not attacked with Tar Pit. Maybe our opponent doesn't expect us to clock with the Tar Pit against our opponent's Ashiok, so they put it to 3 here, but we can always just kill this Ashiok, potentially. Snapcaster Mage to Serum Visions. Is this something that we care about? We can Mystical Dispute. And then Logic Knot after. Spinning 2 spells to answer our opponent's Snapcaster Mage feels pretty awful, but it may not be the worst here. The Snapcaster Mage will clock us. I think we actually might be able to clock them faster with our Tar Pit, though. Let's see. So Snapcaster Mage currently is a 7-turn clock. We can send 3 at Ashiok and then have a 5-turn clock against them. So currently our onboard Tar Pit will beat them and still unlock our fetch land, assuming they don't have like a bolt effect or something. So I guess this is fine. Worst comes to worst, we just trade our Tar Pit for the Snap, which is as awful a trade as it sounds, but we could remand their flashback spell here and go +1 card. I don't think it's worth it, though. Yeah, let's just let it be. And I, again, think that we're probably just drawing cards with Esper Charm here. Actually, them playing land makes me more inclined to make our opponent discard. Yeah, let's get aggressive here. I don't like, opponent, that you have cards in hand, so let's fix that. Ooh, and it just happens. Discarding Valakut, Awakening, and Emrakul. That's pretty good. Okay. Yeah, there's nothing else that we're doing. Activating Tar Pit and clocking Ashiok allows us to fetch. If they have a Bolt, then we only have 2 mana out, but we have double Force, so it's probably fine. Let's go for the value here. Yep. Here goes nothing. Get this Ashiok out of play, first things first. Which, of course, just happens. And, yeah, now we pass back. They crack their Islet to draw. I guess that is a factor. We're so up on cards, though, that pitching cards to Force Negation is basically just free here, so let's let this go. Serum Visions is not killing us at the moment. I suppose our opponent has a 6-turn clock instead of a 7 if we do fetch with our Delta. So that might be a reason not to fetch here. Until we absolutely have to, that is. Another land is fine. Yeah, so let's clock with this Tar Pit. Dispel was an amazing draw, by the way. I don't know when this one was added to our hand. It might have been this very draw step, but this one's fantastic. Draw 2 cards with Archmage's Charm. Is that what you want to do? Should we dispel this? I think we do. We have double Force Negation here, so if all else fails, I think we'll be able to counter our opponent's spells. Ooh, and they're playing a nice, juicy, mystical dispute target. Love it. Let's not fetch, since we don't technically have to. No thanks on that Force Negation. They fetch. That shortens their clock as well. Now we have a 3-turn clock on them. Flusterstorm. Excuse me? Alright, so all of this was to fight over this Archmage's Charm. I think it is probably correct to just go ahead and Logic Knot the Charm here. We do have double Island to get. Yeah, let's go ahead and just do this. This also lets us make use of our Logic Knot, which is very quickly going dead thanks to our opponent's Ashiok minuses. We have Force Negation. I mean, there's nothing our opponent can cast this upcoming turn that really bothers us. Even a Blood Moon is, like, not even really a problem, so we can do this for 2, I suppose, just because. And there's no reason to do that. Let's just do it for 1. Our opponent doesn't have any mana floating, right? Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I really didn't want you to have cards, opponent. I'm sorry. That's just how it is. We'll yield through this turn. Don't want to deal with this stack. Let's just let it all resolve. We still have to click for the Flusterstorms. That's kind of interesting. Archmage's Charm. Do we force this? I don't see why not. And we pitch the Remand here, as the Force is a hard answer to our opponent's Through the Reach. Remand is not. And we have our opponent on the faster clock here, so looking good. Actually, let's keep our blue mana up as much as possible. Activate. Crash. Send it back. We have Force plus Dispute back up here, actually, which is interesting. Valakut Awakening. So they're going to draw 1 card with Valakut Awakening. Sure. 3 mana cycle. Not something I'm worried about. Ooh, Relic of Progenitus is quite interesting. Let's clock with our Tar Pit, of course. The question is, do we play the Relic? I think we do. If our opponent has exactly Through the Reach plus Emrakul, then our Force of Negation beats that anyways, so our opponent is dead this upcoming turn if they don't have an answer for a Tar Pit or a way to kill us immediately. Snapcaster Mage. Interesting. Well, we can free cast our Force if our opponent has a Bolt, so let's just crack this Relic now. Yeah. Okay, and that was the match. Very interesting one. We only lost game 2 there because of mistapping Field of Ruin, not a Field of Ruin, a regular land source instead of a Field of Ruin, so that was very convincing. So yeah, let's talk real quick about the matches that we played. So, you may have noticed, again, I did mention this before, but the deck obviously performed in several X1 records. Of course, the last one we probably should have gone to O, but regardless, Esper is prone to having very non-polarized matchups, actually. A lot of 2-1s or 1s and 2s, which actually can be a liability when it comes to like longer tournaments where you need to have better tiebreakers. So I'm not sure exactly how that would play out in a kind of a grander scale. We could potentially have won our game against our match, I mean, against Pinkie Pie. There was a line that I missed, which would have involved Archmage's Charm to steal their Germ token from a Batter Skull instead of letting it resolve, and that would have given us immediate lethal if our opponent's last card was not Path to Exile or a Fatal Push. That if they did have the removal spell there, then we would have lost our opponent's Batter Skull, actually, which is the reason why I just immediately, without thinking, went to counter it. But I think going for the win there and having cast the Archmage's Charm to gain control would have been the best line, and then our opponent was very low on time compared to us, and I think we actually could have won match 1, in fact. But yeah, overall pretty good. We did, like I said, learn some things about the deck. So first of all, the card that I want to talk about most immediately is Remand. This is a card that's not very typical for Esper Draw-Go to be playing. I've definitely seen 1 or 2 copies in the past as kind of like a supplement to additional counter magic, and like after you've played your Think Twices and stuff. Again, like I'm talking about, this is something kind of from the past. So we have seen Remand in this deck, but Remand is uniquely good right now. Every time I casted a Remand in these matches, it felt insane. There are some matchups where you side out Remand, like against the aggressive ones or against the Aether Vial decks, but that's all good and fine. Remand is very impressive. In fact, I might even consider a 4th copy, but that might be a little too much. And the reason being, Remand is a liability against those fast aggro decks, and having 4 instead of 3 just slightly increases your chance of having this card in your opening hand against an aggressive strategy, and that's not really exactly where I want to be. Which actually brings me to the next point, which is these eliminates. They're here to fix a very specific problem. Ren Insects and Teferi Time Raveler are those problems. And Eliminate is just very weak in the aggro matchup where Esper needs the most help. And against those Planeswalkers, we can come up with lines like using Cryptic Command to bounce, or clocking with a Tar Pit, which is why they're there in the first place, in order to control an opponent's Planeswalker. Eliminate is not really how I want to be answering that threat. We also have Cycle Shark Typhoon to make a creature to start clocking our opponent's Planeswalker, which is something that is a new effect for Esper to have access to, or relatively new as well. So I think for those reasons, we have Planeswalkers covered, and we definitely lost some games, if not the match, against a Naya Landfall aggro deck for not having Fatal Push. So my official opinion as of right now is that Fatal Push is still superior and should be the choice of removal spell over the newer one here. Eliminate, not really that impressive. What else? Oh, yeah, obviously, we need 1 Mystic Sanctuary. And actually, something that is intriguing to me is that I don't think that we necessarily need to change the mana base at all for our Mystic Sanctuary. We might be the only deck that can support playing all of these lands right here and still being able to get Mystic Sanctuary online late enough in the game, because we're going to turn 30 with our Esper control deck here, and at some point in time, our land base will be active with enough islands, and that is kind of where I'm at. I could see trimming 1 colonnade, perhaps, just to make absolutely certain that we have a maximum amount of blue sources here, but there are several games that went long enough that drawing a Mystic Sanctuary to rebuy Cryptic several times and eventually find a Supreme Verdict, for example, that came up several times. There were games against our aggro opponents where Mystic Sanctuarying back at Timely Reinforcements would have been quite strong. Mystic Sanctuary is kind of like a way to hedge in those matchups. It gives you additional copies of Supreme Verdict when you need them. It lets you rebuy Timely Reinforcements in matchups that are really bad, where you really would like to draw as many Timely Reinforcements as physically possible. So, and of course, Mystic Sanctuary is just good in general. Against our control opponents, we can Esper Charm to make them discard, fetch for a Mystic Sanctuary, put Esper Charm back on top deck Esper Charm, and then immediately be able to Mind Rot our opponent again, put them on empty resources, and that can be quite strong. Yeah, I just think that the Sanctuary is very good. I intentionally chose not to play it, but in all honesty, my logic for choosing not to was pretty weak, especially considering we're planning on going so long anyways. So I think 1 Mystic Sanctuary is pretty much a must, if not a given. So Otherwise, I was impressed with the deck in general. I think that Archmage's Charm is quite strong in this deck, as Esper Charms, I guess it would be 5 through 8. But the fact that they're additional counter magic and give us some more interaction for very fast creatures, like Swift Spears or Soulscar Mages or what have you, I think that makes the Archmage's Charm inclusion very strong. And of course, we're already trying to fix for Cryptic anyway, so the triple blue is not really an issue. I also was very subtly impressed by Shark Typhoon. I've played a bit of Shark Typhoon in other blue-white control decks, such as just straight blue-white. Even in those like Bant control decks, sometimes Shark Typhoon doesn't feel very strong. And I've just been very impressed with Shark Typhoon. I originally included it as kind of a replacement for Think Twice, as a way to, make some creatures against a Resolve to Fairy, or in general, just understanding that I might at some point in time be cycling Shark Typhoon for 0 and just getting the front half of a Think Twice, and that was good enough for me. And that's exactly how it performed. When we had to cycle Shark Typhoon, we went ahead and did so, and there were several times where Shark Typhoon was able to give us an additional win con. We played hardcasted Shark Typhoon several times. Maybe not several times. I remember we distinctly played against the 4-color Omnath build. But in general, having that option is very nice, and Shark Typhoon is obviously very strong in Esper, as every single thing you play is a non-creature spell, save for the Snapcaster Mages. So it's going to be very strong there. And in general, this card, I think, is a subtle improvement for Esper from previous options, which is fantastic. And yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to say. I could see maybe moving one path out for a third push, as there's not a whole lot of creatures that need to be specifically path to exiled these days. I guess maybe a Dryad is an argument against that, as to Fatal Push a Dryad, you'll need Revolt, and that requires some additional planning around when you play and use your fetches. Actually, I mean, that lines up pretty well with Mystic Sanctuary as well, though, because oftentimes you just want to play out your non-fetch lands first to try to get your Mystic Sanctuaries to be active as fast as possible, and that also lends really well into saving fetches to Revolt Fatal Push. But regardless, I could see that. I am generally a believer in path, but I think in this meta, it might be wise to play more paths than pushes, or at least equal. That's something to test for future videos. Anything about the sideboard? The disputes seemed great. Not sure about having disputes and dispels. It seems a little redundant. I could see shaving one dispute or one dispel to play an additional Fatal Push in the sideboard against those aggressive strategies. I think probably Fatal Push is the right card for the job as well. So I definitely don't mind that. What else? Celestial Purge seemed somewhat weak, actually. Aether Gust oftentimes did what we were hoping a Purge would do. The only caveat to that being mainly threats that our opponent could play that are black spells, such as Liliana of the Veil, Death Shadow, Dark Confidant, that kind of thing. Aether Gust doesn't really touch those threats, but we have other ways to deal with those threats. Liliana of the Veil is really the most problematic. And I haven't played a whole lot of this list against Liliana of the Veil. Last time I played against Liliana of the Veil, we were playing 4 Think Twices and Esper Draw-Go, and you could pretty much just ignore Liliana. And even, like I've said before on different forums and stuff, but I'll reiterate it here. I have numerous times played against an opponent to resolve Liliana, and they get up to 6 and immediately ult Liliana, and they separate some lands versus some other lands, trying to like cut us off colors or whatever, and we keep the best pile and still go on to win against our Liliana opponent. Now, I could see that being a little more difficult without Think Twice, and also with the presence of Written 6, which is a really big problem that's difficult to answer without lots of mana to cycle several, like, Shark Typhoons, Esper Charms, Archmage's Charms to try to find a Cryptic. But then again, we also have Mystic Sanctuary to get Cryptic back from our graveyard, so maybe it wouldn't be too much of a problem to answer, like an onboard Written 6, perhaps. I don't know. It's kind of odd, but we also have Aether Gusts to cover Written 6, so it might be fine to trim one Purge for a third Gust. I could definitely see that. I might try that going forward. And I probably will be playing this deck again in the future. Definitely let me know in the comments if you're interested in seeing more content with Esper Draw-Go. Let me know about the format of the video. Let me know what changes you think would be necessary, or even just good in general, in the deck that you see in front of you. I think this is where I want to leave it off for now. I could see maybe finding a replacement for Relic, but Relic seems fine. And we didn't really play against any Uro decks particularly. We played against the Uro Omnath deck, but to be honest, Reman is just overpowered against Uro. Very impressed with Reman, like I said. Anyways, that's been way too long. I'm going to go ahead and cut this video here. If you enjoyed it, if you gained any information out of it, then go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I like to see y'all interacting, and I like to interact with you as much as I can, so I can't really do that if you don't do the things that you need to do, like commenting on this video and subscribing to my channel. All those things let me know your opinions, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I will see you guys for the next league. This is Redface Menace, signing off.